Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burckhardt. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Today is July 5th, 2023, and I hope you all had a wonderful 4th of July yesterday, if that is a holiday you celebrate. We actually did do a little bit of celebrating here in Europe, but it was not the kind of celebrations that we would have back in the US, of course. There was no fireworks for us, but we still ended up having a very wonderful day and celebrating our independence. Today we have a great guest for you. Her name is Sabrina Hammonds, and she is the owner-operator of Kingdom Connections podcast and media agency. If you need somebody to help you expand your reach in media and get your message out there to the public, this is someone you may want to pay attention to. So let's get right to this interview today. And of course, as usual, I will have some more information and some announcements at the end of this podcast. So be sure and stick around till later. But for now, let's welcome Sabrina Hammonds to Book Banter with Dianne Burckhardt. Since you are a publicist, why don't you give us your elevator speech? Who are you and what do you do?
Wow, yeah. Thank you, Dianne, for having me. I am Sabrina Hammonds, the founder and owner of Kingdom Connections podcast and media agency. And we are a podcast booking company. And this year in particular, we have grown and expanded to really serve authors and help them to get their message and their book in front of their targeted audience through podcast interviews. And so I'm so excited. We've been able to partner with a publishing company this year and really put together what we are calling author podcast tours. And so being able to take that book from launch to going on a virtual book tour. We're so excited to be able to offer that to our authors.
You know, and I have to tell you, I personally love you and what you do because you have made my life so much easier to try and reach out and find good authors. I mean, it's been amazing.
And I feel the same way about you. Like, I absolutely love what you're doing. And the fact that we have been able to have this mutual, what I feel like is a win-win. And I love what you're doing. You're promoting the authors and their messages, and you're allowing them the stage and the time. And then for me, I want to get my authors on good quality podcasts. And so when I found you, I was absolutely thrilled.
Well, you know, and one thing that also just really speaks to me is the fact that you are a female entrepreneur. You own your own business. A lot of the authors that you have been sending towards me are female business owners that are promoting their own work and their own books. And I have always been very big about trying to help women in business to promote themselves. So it's really fantastic that you're doing this kind of a mission too.
Yeah, I feel like it's such a win-win. And I think that's part of what I want people to hear, that when you have a go-between, someone who is going before you to promote your message, and then you find such good quality podcasts, it just becomes this wonderful partnership where it's a win-win-win for everyone involved.
Well, you know, and one thing that I think this helps to dispel misconception that authors are fighting against each other for that place on the bestsellers list, that they don't work together. But that is so wrong. Every author that I have spoken to that has been on my podcast or just that I meet online, they are so helpful and they come together and they support each other because they all understand how tough this business is. And we need resources. And sometimes they're hard to find. So we have to find them in each other.
That's right. I love that. That actually reminds me of something that one of our authors did on her own. And she connected with some of her author friends, and they actually interviewed one another and promoted one another on their own platforms. So they had a conversation around their books and the message behind them, and kind of even just the process of publishing those books. And then they shared their conversation on each other's platforms. So it was just this beautiful cross promotion and supporting each other.
Now, do you just represent authors or do you handle other clients as well?
We represent mostly women who are coaches, authors, speakers, sometimes all of the above. But as I said in the intro, this year in particular, we have really branched out to provide something specific for authors. So I still have one-to-one clients that we serve with podcast booking services, and they are entrepreneurs in some kind of way. But now we are taking on authors from various backgrounds, and many of them, that is their primary, I guess their primary means, or some of them maybe just have a hobby with writing. And I really love that we're getting to serve people from a variety of backgrounds.
One thing that I was really surprised about whenever I started diversifying, I guess you could say, with some of the authors that I was bringing in, that I would have these professional authors who were with publishing houses. And even these professional authors who have a actual publishing house behind them, they're not getting help with their marketing. Unless they are a big name, the publishing houses aren't putting money and effort behind their work to get their name out there and help them get on those bestsellers lists. And that was really surprising to me. I thought there would have been at least, a minimal amount of help with some of this stuff. But some of the authors that I've talked to have said that they get no marketing package at all with their work.
That's really interesting because I would have thought the same thing. And so when I connected with this one particular publishing company, Square Tree Publishing, and we just got to talking about how we could serve the authors in a better way. And that's when we came up with a virtual book tour, author podcast tours, so that they could provide them with something more than just the helping them to launch the book. But a launch really is not just, we're going to launch this one day and then all of a sudden your book is in front of all of these people. But a launch really is months out. Mm-hmm. You continue to take that book and to steward the message and to steward what you have created. And I feel like that's a whole nother entity in itself. The writing, the publishing, the launching, but then the actual promoting is a whole nother leg, I feel like, to your launch.
Oh, definitely. And that's usually the most exhausting part of it too.
Right? I can imagine, because at that point you have put in all of this time and effort to get your words on paper, to get all of the things in place. And then now what you're ready to do is just launch and be done. And then kind of let the pieces fall where they may, or maybe there's a misunderstanding. I feel like when you launch your book, like that's it, you're done. And that's the end of it. But really it's the beginning of something else.
Oh,
and
definitely.
I think that's where a lot of times the book just ends up on a shelf somewhere and it's not really being circulated, because many times we just don't know how to steward the message. I think that's why I really love what I get to do, because then I get to help them steward that message. At that point, they just really want to enjoy the book that you've written. And so I get to do the behind the scenes work so that you're just able to show up and share your book, to share your message and the journey with people so that somebody else can glean from the work that you've put in. Obviously, so you can get your book in front of more people as well.
And for people like me, who this is a solo entrepreneurship, I have to do everything. So that's one of the reasons why I started the podcast, was to actually get word out about me and my books. Just subtly, every once in a while, enter into the conversation information about what I'm working on. And that helps get more word out for what I'm doing too. And it's a way that I can do it that does help. I mean, I'm getting much bigger following on my own personal website. And if I can actually bring attention to other people's work while I'm doing that, it's a fantastic thing for everybody.
Right. Because, really podcasts right now, and for the past few years, have been such an incredibly large, I feel like, resource or tool for people that feel like they have a message that they want to get out to the world, because so many people are not only creating podcasts, but they're guesting on podcasts because people are listening. They're listening all over the world. And
yeah.
Even for those people that say, well, this is really specific what I want to share. Surely there's not an audience for that. There is an audience for that.
There's an audience for everything. Somewhere there is an audience for everything.
That's right. Yeah. And people are listening more than ever, but then they're also still reading. But one of the ways that people are learning about all of these different books or messages or people is because they're hearing about them on a podcast.
What makes you uniquely qualified to help your clients get their message out there?
I think one of the things that really led me to do this is really just my passion for people's stories. And that's not just the books that they write, but really it's the person and the story behind the book that is always so intriguing to me. And so I want to get to know, like, who is this person behind the book, and what are they really passionate about, and why did they write the book in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's almost like I take on part of their message, because I get so, what is the word, like wrapped up in somebody else's story that I'm so fascinated that I can't help but want to share with somebody else. So it no longer just becomes about an exchange, like a business exchange, but this is somebody that I think somebody else should hear from. I feel like it's the passion behind it, because when I'm reaching out, I'm just excited. I'm excited to help them get their message in front of people. And because I do really dig in and dive into their story and the message behind their book, I can see as I'm looking and researching and finding these podcasts, like who would really be a good fit. So not just, I want to get them on as many as possible, because sometimes it's not really the quantity, but it's more of the quality. Like, who really should they be connecting with? Who shares their passion? Who's going to receive them with open arms and promote them too, and get passionate about their message? And I love that in your interview that I listened to with Angela Hughes, that I could feel the excitement from your conversation. Like, you were excited, she was excited, and it was like you were feeding off of each other. So I get the feeling that you share some of that passion for other people's stories too.
Oh, I do. And especially with Angela, it was just so amazing because we both have this fascination with the legends of Arthur. And that's been something that I've been really fascinated with since I was a child. So yeah, we were definitely feeding off of each other when we were having that conversation. Now, if somebody wanted to hire you, what should they do?
First, I would love to have a conversation with them. I would encourage them to either find me on Facebook or check out our website, KC Podcast Agency, and just start with a conversation. Instead of just jumping into something, I like to see where people are in order to know what the next best step is for them. Because sometimes immediately working with us may not be the exact right next step for somebody. But I really like to kind of see where people are so that we know how to best help them with where they're going with the message of their book, and being able to help them promote and share in really the best way possible. So I would just say start with a conversation with us.
I saw on your website that you offer a free consultation.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes we just use that time as a way to help somebody to understand, okay, this is really your next best right step. And then when you're ready to work with us, obviously we're going to welcome you back. But sometimes it's just not the right time for various reasons. Sometimes people have a lot going on and they really don't have the capacity for anything else. I have found that to be true. Sometimes people aren't really sure what they're going to say when they get on a podcast. They're just passionate about their book. And sometimes I think people come to us and we end up kind of helping them to see the message behind their book that they are going to share. Like, it's in there, but it's like they just need someone to help them to pull it out and organize it a bit so that they're more prepared when getting on a podcast. And so sometimes we just help them with that, laying the groundwork, so to speak.
What is the biggest challenge that you seem to face with your company right now? Because there's so many podcasts. How are you managing to find the right ones?
Wow. Sometimes the challenge is in the vetting process of these different podcasts, because we are constantly researching and finding new podcasts, and it takes a lot of time. And sometimes it takes just kind of jumping out there, reaching out and booking someone on a podcast to discover how well it's going to work out, so to speak. Because not every single podcast and every single one that we book is the stellar podcast, but you don't know that until sometimes you go through the process and then you realize, this wasn't the best fit or the absolute best maybe host to work with, because sometimes their level of commitment isn't what you thought it was. And so, for example, maybe they have started, but maybe they haven't been doing podcasting long enough and they decide kind of midway to just stop.
Yeah.
And that's kind of an awkward thing, right? You don't know that that's going to happen and you don't plan for that, but you want to find these good quality podcasts and hosts like yourself that are really dedicated and that understand about promoting one another. And so this whole vetting process really takes time. It takes time and it takes research and it takes building relationships with people.
Yeah, that's definitely a key is relationships, because you can book one author with me, and we have great chemistry together. We are just going back and forth, having a great conversation. But the next person, maybe we don't have that same chemistry and it just comes out a little flat. Sometimes it's just, you have to try it out and see how it works for you.
Yeah. And I think as a guest, our clients have to understand a little bit about the ins and outs of podcasting and being a guest. And when you understand that, I think you go into it with a little bit of a different perspective, since you understand, like, it's not just black and white. It's not either this way or this way. I mean, you're talking about building relationships with people. You're talking about forming genuine connections, and everybody's different, So I think knowing some of that really helps our clients to be more prepared. But yeah, relationships are very important and they take time.
So what is your next big move for Kingdom Connections?
Well, honestly, we are in the process of doing exactly what I just mentioned, and that is vetting podcast and podcast host and finding those people that really want a partnership where it is a win-win. We are able to send them quality guests. Now, obviously, if they feel for whatever reason they're just not a good fit, they can always say, no, we don't really think this is the best fit, but just someone that we can be in relationship with. And we have that understanding of they know our heart and where we're coming from, and we understand what they want to do with their podcast, so we can support each other. So we are building a database of podcast partnerships, along with taking on more authors as well and providing more authors with podcast tours. But the relationship part and the strategic partnership part is very, very important right now.
One of the things that I think is a very big deal for solo entrepreneurs and beginning entrepreneurs is to start networking and to creating all of these support networks to help you further your message and to help you find the resources that you need to build your business. And I think that as more podcasts hit the airways, it's just going to give that many more opportunities for people to network. Because I know that's one of the big things for me about doing this podcast is, since I am an American living in Germany and writing books in English, I don't get a big opportunity to network with other American authors and people who write in English. I could go to a writers group here of German authors, but my German is not really that great at this point to be able to have really good in-depth conversations with them. So being able to have this podcast where I get to have these conversations with other authors about their work, this is my way of networking and building my support system. And it has been amazing. And a lot of the authors that I have really learned a lot from lately have been because of you.
Wow, that's so good to hear. And you're right, like building those connections and networking with others is really important, because sometimes when you're, especially for those that maybe are just launching a book, I feel like the most untapped resource sometimes is your own connections. Like people forget to go to their own people, in order to help them to promote or get their book out or just create excitement around their launch. Sometimes it's their own connections that we forget to tap into, but it is important to grow those connections.
So now this is the point of the interview that I usually attempt to do 5 quick questions. It never works, but I keep trying. So question number 1, what is your favorite fiction book that has not been written by one of your clients?
Oh, okay. That's not been written. Gosh, the book that I actually think about is, you would have to ask me the title. It's a book that I would read to my 4th grade class when I was teaching. And I can't remember the name of the book. That's so terrible. It's about this girl. It takes place in like the Old West. And it was during a time when women could not vote. When she gets of age, she ends up posing as a man so that she is able to vote. It's completely fiction. And now I'm going to have to come back and find the title because that's going to really bother me. But it was about this adventure of this little girl that ends up changing things for women when it came to voting. Obviously, it has some history in there, but the story itself was fiction. But I would read it to my fourth graders at the end of every year. And we would create these things that went along with the story. Like we really dug into it. And some of them would get so excited. And yeah, it was like a fourth grade level book, but I had so much fun with that. And like we would just get all into the story. And now I feel so bad I can't even think of the name of the book.
So we can look it up later and I'll add it in.
Okay.
Question 2. What is your favorite way to unwind when you're not working?
I honestly just really enjoy sitting and having a cup of coffee, sometimes sitting outside if the weather is nice. And sometimes I just enjoy grabbing a book that I have read many, many times. I like Redeeming Love, that book, just a book that I enjoy reading for fun. Mm-hmm. And most of the time it's something that I have read multiple times. But yeah, just sipping on a cup of coffee and maybe reading a familiar book or sitting outside.
That's one thing that I don't think people really talk about very much, the concept of comfort books. It's like, you have comfort food, but you also have comfort books. It's like, because I have 2 books I have read so many times. I could probably just sit here and think through the whole story because I've read it so much. But yeah, whenever I just really want to relax and don't have to really think about it too much, I just want to chill, I read that same book over and over again.
Yeah, there is something really comforting about that.
So question 3, is there a client that you would love to represent, but just don't know how to contact them?
I feel like there's probably a lot of people that I would love to maybe reach out to and just help them with their message. I'm not thinking of one, or not one is not coming to mind. This may sound funny, but I've been encouraging my husband to write. And I think it would be the coolest thing if he would go ahead and write his book and then I could represent him. So I got to get him to write his book so that I can represent him.
I love that. That is a perfect answer. Question 4. If you were not doing the Kingdom Connections agency, what do you think you would be doing right now?
I might still be teaching, perhaps, maybe in another context. Maybe I would have perhaps got the guts to start some sort of education program of my own, because I left teaching not because I didn't enjoy teaching, but really because of the system itself. I felt like just was not the best. And so I did have a thought of, how could I reform the education system in order to make it better? So I would like to think that maybe I would have had the guts to start something of my own with my teaching background. Might still do that. Who knows?
If you get a big enough staff, you can start another business.
Right? Yes. The goal is to definitely add to our team for sure.
Question 5. Do you want to do more podcast interviews yourself, or do you prefer to stay behind the scenes?
Well, could I say both? No. I do enjoy doing the podcast interviews, but I think the shy person in me says I really prefer to be behind the scenes. But I do the podcast interviews because I know that part of my business and part of what I'm called to do is to steward my message well. And so it's hard for me to pour into other people and tell them, okay, it's important to steward your message when sometimes I want to just be in the back and not put myself out there. So yes, I do want to do more podcast interviews, but I definitely enjoy listening to those interviews from our clients and just listening to how they're shining and how they're putting themselves out there. It's kind of like one of those weird proud parent moments, even though I'm not old enough to be their mother, but that's kind of what it feels like.
And you have some fantastic clients too, because I have absolutely just loved every interview that I have done with them lately. It's been fantastic because it was Angela R. Hughes, who just went live today. We've got
Yes.
Wendy Joserna coming up. And next week is Donna Edmond. And oh my gosh, her photo essay, The Women of Wisdom. It's like I'm right in that age group for her women of wisdom. So I loved that project of hers.
Yeah, we feel so honored to just be able to serve them. I mean, they just have such incredible, unique stories and passions. And I think it's what gives me sort of that energy or, just feeding off of what they're passionate about. I love it. I really do.
And Benicia Ponder, she made me feel like I needed to be doing more. she had so much energy and she was just so encouraging. And I'm like, okay, I need to do more stuff now. I've got all this energy. I feel like I need to do more with it.
Yeah, I think she's like an igniter.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think that's probably what makes her a good author coach.
Yes, yes. Light that fire under you and let's get that book written already. I think that's who she is.
Yeah. Is there anything that you think is important for our listeners to know about you and Kingdom Connections that we have not covered?
Wow, I feel like we've covered a lot. So I think I would just end by encouraging those people that are listening that maybe feel ill-equipped perhaps to put themselves out there on a podcast. I just want to encourage you to start where you are. Just start showing up in the space that you're in. And don't be afraid to ask people for introductions and for connections and asking people to come alongside you and support you in your own journey. But just start where you are. And nobody really has it figured out. Nobody. Yeah. And so even the people that are putting themselves out there, they don't have it all figured out either. But you're not going to grow and learn until you start somewhere. So I think I'll just leave with that.
That's a very good message. And honestly, I can tell people I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm like feeling my way through all of this. I've been learning how to put together the sound equipment and doing lots of YouTube tutorials. And it's just, learn as you go. And yes, you make mistakes. I lost an interview because something glitched and wiped the whole thing out. And it was, something that happens. It was a technical issue that I couldn't do anything about. It was the equipment. You learn as you go and you try not to have those kinds of problems in the future.
Right. You just learn as you go. I love that.
Yeah. And I always like to tell people, if you don't ask the questions, the answer is always no. So if I don't ask people for help and to tell me how to do things, the answer is always no, because I didn't even ask. If you don't put yourself out there, you're never going to get recognition because who's going to know? You have to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
And the people who are successful have probably failed so many times that you have never seen. All you ever see is that success that they have.
That's
it probably took them so many trials and mistakes and just complete kerfuffles, before they finally got that success. You don't see that part.
Yeah. So don't allow those successful people to make you think that they've never been on the journey, because we're all on the journey, right?
Oh, definitely. So this has been fabulous. I've been dying to get somebody on who could talk about being a publicist and getting people on podcasts and how to actually get this kind of access and help with people's work. So this is fabulous. I'm so glad you were able to do this.
Thank you so much, Dianne, just for having me. I have really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit better and just our conversation.
And I'm going to make sure that all of your contact information is in the description of the podcast, and it'll be on our website at burckhartbooks.com. And hopefully people will be contacting you more about helping you help them to further their message.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, Dianne.
If you think that Sabrina can help you with reaching out to your public, then you will want to check out her Facebook and her website for Kingdom Connections Podcast and Media Agency. Links to both of those are in the description of today's podcast. Now, as for news for Burckhardt Books, I am working very hard on finishing up the edits for Into the West Family Ties, the 7th and final book in my Into the West saga serial, which I write as Stephen Burckhardt. after we finally get this book published, there are a couple of projects that I have on the books that I'm going to be working on. I have been going back and forth trying to decide between writing my medical biography, the Free Bad Haircuts with Each Craniotomy book that I have planned that talks about all of the neurological problems that I have and the brain surgeries that I survived to get to where I am today. And the other book is, of course, The Touch, my FBI thriller that I've been talking about for a while now. I want to get both of these done and out there at about the same time, so I've decided to attempt writing them at the same time. I'm going to be switching back every week and see how that goes for me, and if it doesn't work out, because this is definitely an experiment for me, because I've never tried to write two books at once. But if it works out, fantastic. They'll both be ready about the same time. And if not, I may have to choose one and just do as I normally do one and then the other. But we'll see, and I'll let you know how the experiment goes. I am also checking out new programs to try to create an online magazine called Book Banter, the magazine. And it would be something to complement this podcast because honestly, we have so much great information in these interviews that does not make it to the podcast because I have to cut it back for time. So I'm thinking I want to do something with that information because it's so good. I want to share it with all of you. So I'm looking at creating an online magazine that I would put out once a month with some of the information that had to get cut from the podcast. It won't be a repeat of information. They will actually complement each other and give you a broader perspective on each one of the authors that I've been presenting to you. And I would actually go back because I still have all of the interviews from all the way back to season 1. I still have the original interviews that I taped before I did the editing. So I can go back and create articles from all of these and bring you some of the fantastic interviews again. So that will be amazing. But right now, we're still busy shopping some computer equipment because my personal computer is getting ready to die. We need to replace that. We're also looking at the programs for flipbooks that will bring you the information as I want to present it. So we're still in the beginning stages of this, and I will let you know as it progresses. Now, as for Book Banter with Dianne Burckhardt, the podcast, next week on July 12th, we have Anne Charles. She is a mixed genre mystery author and a total hoot. You have got to check out this interview. We had so much fun. And her books are pretty cool. She has paranormal. She has straight mysteries. She has some that are a little spicy. So I think if you like mysteries, you can find something in her book catalog that you will like. You definitely want to check her out. After Anne Charles, on July 19th, we have Natasha Dean, and she writes young reader books, she writes young adult books, and she writes adult books. I mean, basically, she just does it all. And she has such a great voice in her work. I read the first one out of the young reader series, Spooky Sleuths. And as a child, I was a huge fan of Encyclopedia Brown, and her books reminded me of that, only with the spooky sort of edge to them. But they're not too spooky. She manages to keep a good balance in her books. But that gives you an update for the next couple of weeks, and I will have more people added to the lineup here very soon. So be sure to subscribe to Book Banter with Dianne Burckhardt so that you never miss a great author interview. Because if you love books like we do, you do not want to miss this podcast. And now you know what time it is, people. It's time for you all to go forth and be happy.